Rita reporting for WORLDbytes. We're here in Dalston in East London to find out what people think about
the events in the Middle East. Why, for example, has Israel been portrayed as uniquely evil?
Let's find out.
what do you feel about the situation in Gaza, and what do you think Israel is being portrayed as uniquely evil?
Now, yes, they are portraying Israel as uniquely evil, but one thing is this: who will want anybody to be throwing stones in his house? And then that person will sit down and say, no, it doesn't matter because you can throw stones. No. What is happening is this: those people that are portraying Israel as evil is this: you do not judge any incident or any case by the surface. If you are not able to find and deal with the root cause of that happening, you can never find the end. Now, Hamas or somebody is throwing stones or the missile to Israel, and you say because it didn't kill many people, and then you say Israel should fold their arms. No, I find that to be one of the greatest injustices of the world today. And everyone that is condemning Israel, what they should look at is it clearly and say, you stop this and let us look at how Israel stop fighting, Hamas stop doing this thing, and let us bring the two of you together.
Do you think Israel has been portrayed as uniquely evil?
Yeah, it's definitely been portrayed as evil in the media. Yeah. I wouldn't really say I've ever seen anything about Israel where apart from people from Israel themselves, I have never seen anyone really say that Israel has a right to do what they're doing. It's always been that Palestinians are victims in what is happening.
Why do you think people have become so hysterical about Israel and Gaza?
I feel that people have become very emotional about the situation because when you see images in the media of young children suffering a lot, it does stir up a lot of emotion. And, every day I'm constantly changing my mind and struggling with it. And, I really have thought about anti-Semitism. And when I see people make drastic measures like taking kosher meat off the shelves in the supermarket, I think maybe they need to stop and think, why am I doing this? And maybe we all collectively in our society need to take another look at the issue.
Yeah, it's a bit funny because this time round Israel and Palestine seems to receive so much more international attention, and Israel's actions have been condemned a lot more internationally this time round than previous times. I think obviously the headlines are very attention grabbing. You always hear about how Israel have bombed schools or bombed refugee camps, and there's also a massive gulf in the Palestinian death toll and the Israeli one. I think in Israel only 70 people have died, and I say only, obviously that's a huge amount, but in relation to Palestine it's been over 1,000, most of them civilians, whilst with Israel it's been soldiers. So I think the way that headlines have been phrased, as I said, very attention grabbing, and I think it's caused a lot of outrage. And again, I think what's happened over the last 10 years, people have seen that Western governments, English one, the American one, have gone and invaded in the Middle East without any cause, and I think people are almost feeling like Israel's attacks on Palestine are again for very little cause. I wouldn't really say it's received more attention than other wars. I think Ukraine's received a fair bit of attention, but because Palestine and Israel have been so continuous for such a long time, I think now it's almost reached boiling point. It's difficult to sympathise with them sometimes because of how many innocent people have died, but I can certainly see how they probably feel they're in a very vulnerable position. They're surrounded in a nation where, if the likes of Iran and Saudi Arabia and everyone had their choice, Israel wouldn't really be there. So, yeah, I kind of understand why they've got that stance, and I don't think that all these actions that people are doing in terms of the kosher food and the film festivals, I don't think that's really going to achieve anything at all.
Are you concerned about the growing anti-Semitism that's going on around the world?
Definitely. I think it's definitely going to be a byproduct of Israel's policies and attacks, because unfortunate thing is when Hamas does their attacks and then Israel retaliates, many people perceive the attack against Hamas to be way out of proportion, and they weigh out the casualties as well. As you see, the casualties for the Palestinian side is far outweighs the Israel. Hence the reason why there's probably a backlash against Jewish people, which is unfortunate. And I think many people may need to direct this not against Jewish people, but maybe try and categorize their views as maybe against Israel's certain policies, but it shouldn't be anti-Semitism. And I think it's getting confused.
It's very hard to judge people when they're operating under very serious circumstances. And yes, I know that the land belongs to the Arabs, and but I also know the need to escape from Europe as well. And really, Israel only exists because it was convenient for the West for Israel to exist. But what were those people going to do at the same time? And I would say right now that people have to look at the reality. They're not moving. So how is it going to be? People have to spend time, negotiate and argue things out, but they have to do that without weaponry. And that's the long game. And there are many people not prepared to take the long game.
I think it's just difficult between, who's right or wrong. But I think obviously when you see that they've got so much firepower and they're it's almost fighting bombs with people with sticks, I just think that that's what people think are wrong. I mean, I don't know, because it goes back so far that I think it's just difficult to side, and I think that's what a lot of people have a problem with. But I think at the moment, yes, Israel are being portrayed as being evil.
People seem to be quite quick to have a go or, attack Israel. With what happened in the Second World War is really bad. The feelings are still there, and I don't know what it is. Well, a lot of people do seem to feel strongly against what's happening in Israel. And the thing is, what Israel have done in response to the rockets being fired, the fact that kids have been shown to be killed, there's this feeling that it seems to have always been there, and now is another excuse to people to be anti-Semitic.
Particularly when you go on protests, when you hear people talk about the kind of question of Israel and Palestine, you undoubtedly hear comments that are said about the Jews. I think people conflate Israel, Jews, Zionists as a kind of political identity altogether, and that it's undeniable that you hear these kind of comments where that can be on various different levels. Sometimes it's about the kind of conspiracy theories about how Israel has operated, and I think people have a tendency to throw themselves onto this kind of issue and see Israel as the ultimate bad force. And then I can appreciate that for Jews today, they either have to denounce Israel or they're kind of viewed as being a supporter of it. Now that seems to be quite complicated to me. I like some things about the British government. I'm a British citizen. I disapprove of many things that they do. I don't feel that I would have to denounce what they do outright to be able to have an opinion. I think that for me that seems to be the really striking thing, that if you're Jewish, you are made to have an opinion on Israel rather than being viewed as an individual who has an opinion on a vast number of things.
Just because you criticise Israel doesn't mean that you are anti-Semitic. That's utterly ridiculous. I mean, actually a lot of Jews are anti-Israel. Does that make them anti-Semitic? No, it doesn't. So I think it's a very easy term. Everyone goes up, oh God, they're doing stuff if you say anything against Israel, you say this is not right, and they're suddenly branded as anti-Semite, which is not true. You just have an opinion. And I think there's a danger in today's society. You can't criticise anyone or mention anything to do with race, religion, or any of that side of stuff without saying you are obviously a bigot, which isn't the case. It's just you're making sometimes a valid point, often not valid point. But I think in the case of Israel, it is interesting to see how, in comparison to the Ukraine crisis, where people don't really have an opinion because they don't really know what's going on, they don't really know much more about the Ukrainians than the Russians. People haven't gone, oh my God, this is dreadful. Whereas in Gaza, and there is no doubt Gaza has been run like a concentration camp. Utterly disgusting the way that they went about controlling people within Israel. But it's not to say that the Arab world hasn't done equally awful atrocities throughout that region. I think it's sad. I think it's sad that borders exist in general.
Yes, I do believe the media has an agenda against Israel. I think they are being portrayed as sort of aggressors against helpless victims, but I think the situation in Gaza is not that easy to be portrayed as aggressors against victims. I think because of Israel's unique history, I think a lot of people have a very bad idea of what Israel really is, and they don't see it as a country that should exist, which is a very racist view in my viewpoint.
Do you think there's a wave of anti-Semitism going on in Europe?
I do believe so. After the intense portrayal of how many Israelis have killed how many people in Gaza, it seems a lot of people have started blabbing off against Israel and being very anti-Semitic on social media and generally in clubs and social places.
Okay, whilst this is quite a hard subject, I think whilst I disagree that the things that Israel are doing are bad, and I think the things that Palestine are doing are bad. I think war's bad, and I think the conflict's very destructive, and there's been a lot of life lost. So on that side, I don't think it's being portrayed as more evil than perhaps it is. I think a lot of evil things are going on, but I think it's being portrayed as uniquely evil in the sense that a lot of emphasis is being placed on Israel in comparison to some of the other conflicts that are going on at the moment. For example, Ukraine, which is a much closer neighbour, I'm hearing a lot less about in the popular media and in the popular public. A lot less of my friends have something to say about what's going on in Ukraine, or even know about what's going on in Ukraine than they do about Israel. So in that sense, yes, there's definitely a greater emphasis on what's going on in Israel.
And what do you think of the protests that are going on in the world against Israel? Do you think they are contributing to this process in a positive or negative way?
It's really positive that people are engaged in politics, but on the other hand, when people are misinformed or a lot of people actually don't know what's going on and then they still go out to protest, I think that's a negative because then it's transformed into anti-Semitism. People are destructing buildings, synagogues, things like that. That's not positive. I don't see anything good coming out of that. But I think people being engaged and people having that discussion through the protest, through the forum of protest, I think that's definitely a positive.
What do you think of the protests that are done against Israel all over the world?
I don't think it will achieve very much. I mean, the Israelis, regarding the Jewish background, I don't think with the persecutions they suffered, and especially what they suffered in the Second World War with the Holocaust, I don't think the Jews are going to be swayed by anyone being against them when they see that they're defending themselves.
I think Israel's always going to get a lot of backlash because they have a very, very sophisticated military. So whenever they're going to fight, whoever they're going to fight with, that person's going to get it. So obviously, if you're fighting someone who has mediocre weapons, you're going to look like the big bully. But it may well be that if you're being triggered by the smaller guy, it will end up giving the impression in the world that you're going out there and doing sort of irrational behaviour. So in terms of backlash, I mean, I think it's wrong again for people to then want to, mistreat Jewish people or to like I think somewhere they went and they shot somebody in a museum. I think that's unacceptable, Whilst I understand that we have feelings and it hurts us to watch this going on, again, it's a political issue, you know what I mean? It's something that the politicians, and yeah, I'm not saying people don't have a right to voice their opinion. So if they feel like they want to go on a protest march in support of the Palestinians, I can't say that's wrong or right. But actually it's going to be sorted by the politicians in those places or the people, at least ruling or running those places.
I think whenever there's a situation where people are getting killed, it's wrong anyway. I don't think you can't start adding up totals as in, this many people have died, therefore it's more important. Anytime anyone is unjustly sort of killed, it's wrong, end of. So, I mean, I understand if there's maybe greater numbers, there's maybe a greater sense of urgency, but I don't think it's fair to kind of start counting up totals to kind of justify how bad something is, because at the end of the day, death is death and it's not nice and it's not fair.